Welcome to We Are All Okay Wednesday. In a world filled with chaos, here we reconnect with our innate emotional and spiritual well-being. Join us as we dive into discussions, reflections, and practices to remind ourselves we are all okay. As Allah tells us, He will never burden us with more than we can bear. Hey, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalam, wassalam, rasulullah. Welcome to We Are All Okay Wednesday, where we're talking about divine comfort, overcoming loneliness through faith. And one of the things that we're appointed to when it comes to feeling lonely is that Allah is always there. And of course, He says, indeed, it is we who created humankind and fully know what their souls whisper to them, and we are closer to them than their jugular vein. Yet, sometimes we feel like we're very alone, even with lots of people around us. So we're going to unpack that today because, of course, we don't want to be having thinking that is leading us away from Allah and believing we really are alone, when in fact there's a simple shift in the way we see things that can make all the difference, alhamdulillah. So I just love to start sessions with you reflecting on your own situation so that when I'm speaking, that's in the forefront of your mind and it's having you reflecting inwards what this means to you, what's resonating with you. So the questions I have to kick off that self-reflection is, like, when do you feel lonely? Are you alone? Are you lonely despite being with others? And just have a little moment to connect with that feeling of loneliness and what does it look like for you. And inshallah, something I speak about today will resonate with you and maybe a source of solace, even maybe a solution, to that feeling that you're having, because there is always hope. There is always hope because Allah can say be and it is. So there's always dua. But let's see if we can have you see things from a different perspective today, inshallah. So this is a saying from Ibn al-Qayyim, who says, every time you feel disheartened by your being alone on this path, then look to those who came before you and strive to catch up with them. Interesting. And I do think that there's some really profound wisdom in those words, because quite often in our loneliness, we're looking backwards and we're looking at what hasn't been, or why, wondering why things are the way they are. We get into quite a heavy, deep, sad feeling. But if we are looking ahead, well, looking at this path for those that came before and striving to catch up with them, it is like looking ahead, because it's like they're ahead of us. They've already come before us. They've strived and done amazing things. How can we catch up with them? How can we be like that too? It changes the direction we're looking away from what was to what can be. But again, when you're stuck in that, there's that sort of thought of, yeah, but how? How can I do that? I hear our amazing, wise imams and da'is and sheikhs sharing with us all these concepts, which are very inspiring. What I hear a lot of people say is, yeah, but how? Especially when we're caught up in some stuck thinking that is holding us back and we can't see the way forward. So I just want you to understand that loneliness is only actually lonely thinking. It's no more, no less. It isn't actually to do with our circumstance, because as some of you may have realized, You feel lonely even though there are people around you. So loneliness isn't about whether you have people around you or you don't have people around you, because there's some people who are on their own and don't feel lonely. It's not on the outside that creates loneliness. Although that's where we tend to look for the answers. That's where we tend to try and fix things. Loneliness is actually an internal thing, and it's coming from lonely thinking. It's coming from various ways we might be thinking. For instance, thinking that our life should be a particular way with people around us, being loving and caring and connecting and good conversations. And we may have a picture in our mind that this is how my life should look like. This is how a good life looks like. And because at this particular point in time, it doesn't look like that, we end up having lonely thinking about it, thinking that there's something wrong with us, or there's something wrong with our situation, or there's something wrong with the people around us, that they can't see how amazing it would be to be with us. Maybe in a marriage, it's a lot of thinking around, well, I'm not okay unless we have, deep and meaningful conversations and all that connection. Of course, we would love to see that sort of thing in all marriages. However, when we create a need for that in order for us to be emotionally okay, we create a cage for ourselves that's dependent upon another person's behavior, another person showing up in a way that we expect them to in order for us to be okay. But we created that expectation. We created that picture. It all came from our own thinking. And the other person, maybe they do really care, but their way of showing it isn't the way that you register as care. And so you're, misunderstanding and therefore having lonely thinking about it. And so what can we do about that? Well, first of all is actually understanding and then believing, because if you understand it but you don't really believe it, it's not going to shift anything. So understanding and then truly believing that, okay, the only reason I feel lonely in this current circumstance that I'm in is because of the way I am looking at it, the way I am thinking about it, because it is the qadr of Allah that I'm in this situation. And so therefore Allah has said I can bear it, because he says he'll never burden a soul beyond what they can bear. So there's something about the way I'm looking at it, the way that I'm thinking about it, where I'm not seeing the wisdom in it. I'm not seeing the potential in it. I'm not seeing the beauty in it. I'm just lost. So that's the first, the first step is to actually realize that that's what's going on. The shift to what we call high level thinking is the answer. And high level thinking is thinking about Allah and bringing it back to including Allah in our thinking around the situation. So I already gave us some clues when on the previous slide when I said that we realize that Allah doesn't burden us with more than we can bear, that this is a test, that there's something that we're not seeing about it, but it's having that tawakkul, that trust in Allah, that it's all going to work out, that we are going to be fine. And so that shift in thinking can make all the difference. And I'm going to share with you what I feel is an amazing shift of thinking that all of us can have, that can really change our whole perspective of our entire life. And it's the way I live my life now, which is why even if everyone that's close to me is completely off track and not being very loving at all, I don't feel lonely, because I am so busy in this way and feel connected with Allah. And it's through what I'm about to share with you that connection with Allah grows, and then We don't feel alone because we feel that, Allah is there as He is, but just sometimes we disconnect from that, disconnect from seeing that. So just to summarize the sorts of thinking before we get into the solution, sometimes we may actually be alone, and then we're having lonely thinking about it. But being alone doesn't necessarily mean we need to be lonely, because you can be alone and really enjoy just looking at Allah's creation, having self-reflection, reading a book, painting a picture. There's so many beautiful ways being alone can be very grounding, very spiritual, very rewarding. So it's not about being alone at all. Sometimes feeling lonely can be feeling not understood. So thinking that, well, they don't understand me. No one understands me. I'm alone here. I'm by myself. Nobody gets me. That is just our thinking, because the reality is no one will ever truly understand another person. And that's something that we teach in our Peaceful Hearts program, a concept called separate realities, which is an absolutely mind-blowing game changer in your life, right? So if you're looking for one of those, I definitely recommend you check out our Peaceful Hearts program, inshallah. But we don't need to be understood to feel okay amongst a group of people. We don't need to be understood to belong in a group of people. We don't have to have the same thinking as other people to belong in a group of people. This is all a misconception that we've created. Not feel heard. So that again is another one where we feel like, well, we need to be heard to be okay. There are times when I could be just talking to the wall. In fact, I used to joke with my kids when I'd be talking and then realizing no one's paying any attention and everyone's completely ignoring me. I'd actually start having a conversation with the wall, and then they'd pay attention. I go, hello, wall. Shall we have a conversation? No one else seems to be listening to me. That's a bit of playful parenting for you. And that's just the way I would, tackle those things in a kind of joyful, playful manner. But we can get caught up in our minds that, well, I need to be heard. Somebody needs to listen to what I'm saying for me to be okay. And when we have that thinking, we can feel very lonely, very alone, taken for granted. Again, we had a conversation about that in our Peaceful Hearts Q&A this morning, about how we've trained people by being so of service to them in a maybe dysfunctional way, that at a point in time when we kind of end up with an expectation that something might be reciprocated, or we get to a point where we can't continue that level of service, and then all we're getting from them is whinging and complaining, or even being angry with us because it's like we're letting them down. We kind of feel like we're very alone in the world, being taken for granted, but we kind of trained them that way in our behavior, and we don't see that. And so feeling taken for granted and lonely in that way is again also coming from the way we are perceiving it and thinking about it, instead of from a perspective of what is the solution, and so many more. So I'm hoping that some of what I'm unpacking here you're resonating with, and so you feel understood yourself, because it is nice to be understood. Sometimes it is nice to feel like somebody else gets what you're going through. And if I haven't mentioned something that resonates with you, that comes under the "and more." It just probably means that it didn't come to my mind, to share other examples. So just stick with your own examples. So we have, before I get into the solution, we have another video for you to watch. It is called From Listless Rather Than Lonely to Loving. But I do think that that lonely feeling is kind of a listless experience. Listless being kind of lacking life. Listless is a bit lifeless, like feeling a bit defeated, deflated, right? And what the opposite of that and of feeling lonely is to feel loved and feel loving and be in that kind of loving space. So I'm just going to share a little snippet of this video, and then at the end I'll share with you how you can access the whole video and listen to the whole conversation between Sister Lena and myself. You were there physically, but probably not there emotionally, right?
That's right. And that's the thing. I realized that when I started working with you. I didn't even understand it. I didn't even realize it was happening. I thought I'm there for my kids, and I thought that's it. That's all I'm doing is I'm there for my kids. That's what gave me some comfort. I'm there for my kids. In fact, I was not there for my kids.
Yeah.
Not in the way they needed. Not in the way they needed. I mean, in the basic, eating, drinking, taking them somewhere, picking them up, but not at an emotional level.
So what Lena's pointing to here is that emotional disconnection that we have. We're going through the moves in life, but we're not really connected with the people around us. And so from both perspectives, she's feeling very alone, doing everything on her own. From the perspective of the children, and what I hear when I listen to what Lena's explaining there, is those children probably felt lonely, because while they were being completely cared for and they had a mum who was caring for them there, and of course she loves them, they didn't feel the emotional connection from her. And so they probably had some lonely thinking around their experience, subhanAllah. And that's why our kids can tend to go out and seek out companionship that may not be appropriate or may not be the sort of companionship that we would approve of, because they're not getting that connection that they're looking for at home. So how do we switch across to a loving space? And this, I believe, is the answer to everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you are the best people ever raised for the good of mankind, because you've been raised to serve others. You enjoin what is good and forbid evil and believe in Allah. I believe being of service alleviates loneliness, but we need to understand what I mean by being of service. I don't mean being a slave to people. I mean being of service to Allah, which may also mean that we're being of service to people. And as soon as that being of service is about Allah rather than about people, our whole purpose in life shifts. Our thinking about loneliness shifts, because we're now in a world of showing up and putting our time and our energy, our love, our skills, our knowledge, all the gifts that Allah's given us towards how can we be of service to Allah? How can we show up in a way that is going to reap the most rewards? And this shift to this thinking, which is definitely a form of high-level thinking, alleviates loneliness, because there's no time to be lonely. The other way in which it alleviates loneliness is because our intention is for Allah. We're not so caught up in our own head about expecting others to show up for us in a particular way for us to be okay. We're actually focused on giving. We're focused on what can we do to be of service. We're not focused on what can others do to be of benefit to us. It's a complete shift in how we're perceiving things. And in the process of being of service, we can also meet amazing, wonderful people. That means that we do have a more engaged, interactive, social existence, just as a result, as an implication of being of service. Because most of the time, if we're being of service, it does include human beings. How it alleviates some of the thinking that I shared before is, if we're being of service to Allah, not to our children or our husband, we're being of service to them secondary to being of service to Allah, then there'll be a healthiness to the way we are being of service in the family, where we're not harming ourselves, we're not overdoing it, we're not pushing ourselves beyond the limits, we're not expecting ourselves to do more, be a superhero. We have realistic expectations on ourselves. We say no when it's not the right thing. And that kind of brings in here the enjoying what is good and forbid evil, right? So the believe in Allah part is our intentions. The serve others is how we serve Allah, but we're being a servant of Allah first and foremost. So the intention for Allah comes first. Then we're being of service to others, but then there's the enjoying the good and forbid the evil part. Because where we get it wrong is we think that being of service to others means that we do everything for them. But then we're enabling others to be lazy. And so we're not enjoining the good or forbidding the evil. There are times when people may expect us, especially within the family, to always be of service in a particular way. Well, first of all, we're human, and that's not necessarily possible. Secondly, is that really serving them to not, for them not to have the opportunity to learn how to take care of themselves, to learn how to do it for themselves, to be able to be self-sufficient as well? So I love this verse because it encompasses the healthy way of being of service to people, way where we're caring for ourselves, but we're also caring for them, because we get a bit into a black and white thinking that caring for them means that we do everything for them. That's not necessarily true. Being available emotionally for people is way more important, way more helpful, way more part of the solution than doing things for them, to be honest. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the reward of goodness is nothing but goodness. Can you already feel the energy shift? I mean, I'm feeling it in talking about it from this perspective, of thinking about it from this perspective. My work, which, obviously part of my work is to be able to provide for my family, but that is kind of secondary to I'm doing this for the sake of Allah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me with an understanding that changed my life. Something that completely took us from chaos, anger, fear, frustration, overwhelm, a really, really dense negative energy in the household, to one of love and joy and compassion and fun. And it is important to me to share that with others. It's exactly why I'm here today, sharing with you, so that you can see the possibility of it too. That's being of service, primarily for the sake of Allah, but then being of service to the people. And I get so much goodness out of it. I keep growing. Maybe I get more goodness out of it than you do, actually, because I get to think about these things. And every single time I'm sharing with you, in my own head, my own scenarios are going through. And sometimes I go, oh, yeah, I see now what's going on there, right? Because sometimes I'm not seeing it either. A lot of the time, I'm not seeing it either. It's not about always being able to see it. It's just being able to know that that's what's going on, subhanAllah. So there is so much hope, and here's some hope from a couple of people who have been through our programs and learned, this understanding that makes all the difference, that feelings are coming from thought in the moment and how we can move forward. Sajda's been through our peaceful parenting and peaceful hearts programs. Romy's gone right the way through to completing the certification. But Sajda says the worst enemy you could ever have in life is yourself. And you may well relate to that given what I just shared. I found it hard to love myself and blamed everyone around me for everything that was wrong in my life. What I learned and began to understand is that feelings come from thought in the moment. I realized how much power I had within myself. This new understanding has given me a new lens to see my life with. I am in a place of peace, from darkness into light, in tune with the reality of how things really are. As I continue to learn and understand deeper and see life with more clarity, you can really be peaceful inside out. And Romy said, I used to get upset with my son because I was expecting him to connect with me, but all interactions were happening while he was on his phone with someone else. This is such a relatable experience, and where a lot of people probably feel really lonely because they're in a room and everybody's on their phones and nobody's actually engaging with each other. Anyway, she said, this made me feel bitter towards him. I realized I was reacting to my expectation that his undivided attention was required for me to feel heard. See how that resonates with the stories I was talking about before about feeling heard, feeling understood. I discovered he was in fact hearing me and responding to me while being on his phone. So from his perspective, he was giving me his attention. I was then freed from the bitterness and was able to communicate with him in a better way. So see how a shift in thinking completely changes the experience of the situation. So my final thoughts today is loneliness is our own perception of our life, and a change of perspective is the solution. Being of service helps us see our relationship with others being about Allah and not about ourselves, right? It becomes about giving for the sake of Allah rather than looking for how can we receive from others. That if you really want this to shift, make dua to Allah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our Shafi. He's the one that cures our hearts. And keep joining us and learning more as we continue every week, coming to you with more and more, inshallah, and go through what we have already that's previously recorded and continue to benefit, inshallah. So your next steps, watch from listless to loving. You'll find the link with the video. Book in a We Are Okay coaching session with me if you would like some help getting unstuck from loneliness, and start your journey to a life filled with love. Thank you for joining me for another empowering We Are All Okay Wednesday. I hope you found today's discussion uplifting and insightful. Remember, your well-being matters, and you are never alone on this journey. For more resources and support, visit weareallok.com, spelt WERALLOK.com. Until next time, may the peace, love, and blessings of Allah be with you. All right, so let me stop sharing and pop back in the room here and check on the chat. Walking Dead, yeah. Waiyaki, Sister Aksa. I'd love to hear from you, Sister Aksa. What bit was so profound? What hit you that was profound? If you're able to come on the mic, that would be awesome. If not,
I found it very profound that when we shift the focus from our needs to the needs of other people, we become somebody of service to others. And people also start giving importance to us, because when we are not needing anything from them, it takes the power from them, and they observe it. And we become more important to them because they know that we are not doing it for our personal gain or selfish reasons. We are doing it for the right reasons.
Brilliant. That is very awesome takeaway, sis. MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair for sharing. Hope everyone else saw how deep that was. MashaAllah. Changes everything. We've got a question here. Asia says, what if the subject is your mother and father? I don't see why it being a mother and father would make a difference given what we've been through. What, Asia, are you able to perhaps elaborate more on your question so that maybe I understand where you may not be seeing it?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I want to open up about, my situation a little bit, if that's okay. And it's a question that's been like really bothering me in the back of my mind.
Hmm.
But I have really old parents, and like I've come into Islam not long ago, and like my parents always use the if you don't do this for me, you're gonna go to hell. And then like they'll use a lot of emotional blackmail, and like it like I find that like I understand they're old, and like I always say when I do anything for them, I like always start off with for the sake of Allah.
Yeah.
But it's to the extent where like there's a cup of water in front of them, and I'll be praying, like I'll start my prayer, and then my dad will call me, and I'll have to stop my prayer, like end my prayer, and then rush to assist him, and he'll say, give me the water, and the water is right in front of him. And I was, like,
So Asia, this is where I get your point, and we won't have time to go into the whole story,
Yeah.
but I think I can point you in the right direction. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you're partway there. You're partway there in the sense that when you get the water, you're doing it for the sake of Allah, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The next part of the equation is when you're praying, that is your only purpose in that moment is to pray for Allah. And you don't obey Allah's creation over the creator. So we're not meant to break our prayer. And so this is where the enjoining the good and the forbidding the evil bit comes in, even though they're old. You say to them, I can't come when I'm praying. Or there are sometimes I can't come straight away. If I hear you call, just be patient, I will come. And so then if he keeps calling and he keeps calling, you finish your prayer and you don't rush it. You pray as you would normally pray.
Yeah.
And again, you put your intention back for the sake of Allah. That helps you be grounded and compassionate towards him, even though he's behaving in an irritated way. And you go, yes, Dad, what can I do for you? And you just continue to show up in a way that is pleasing to Allah, despite their behavior, crossing the line. Because emotional blackmail is not okay. And this is the part that is the challenge. I think a lot of people are very challenged with setting limits with parents because we grew up with it being the other way around, right? They were setting the limits on us as kids. But now that we're grown up and we're adults, it's absolutely okay for us to set limits with our parents, especially when they're doing things like emotional blackmail. And one of the things that I read, because I read a whole book on emotional blackmail, because I had fallen in the trap of being in a very abusive marriage, and emotional blackmail was very rife in there. To learn and to understand emotional blackmail. And one of the pieces of advice in that book was, if someone asks you for something and they do it with emotional blackmail, the answer has to always be no.
Yeah.
If they ask you without emotional blackmail, then you've got the choice to decide yes or no. It's still a choice. Just because they ask you nicely doesn't mean you have to say yes, but you still have the choice. And the reason for that is that the way emotional blackmail is, it's like a cancer, it keeps growing. You say yes to when they ask in that way for a small thing, then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until next thing you discover you're doing things for people that go against your own values, against your own well-being, because you feel like you can't say no.
Yeah. Like in a sense, like I've been feeling like I'm having to parent them rather than it being the other way around.
Yeah.
And like last week I did the silent treatment, and today I broke the silent treatment, and they were really nice today for the first time. They were treating me really, really nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, oh well, this works now. So
But you see,
yeah,
it might have worked this time, but it might not work next time. Having strategies like that isn't really the best solution. Unfortunately, it's just like, okay, and I'm not suggesting for 1 second your parents are malicious, because people who use emotional blackmail usually is a result of, well, that's what they've grown up with, that's what they've learned that way is the way you get what you want, right? So it's a yeah, so it's not done maliciously. So when we change the dynamic, there'll be this peaceful part where it's feels like, oh yeah, okay, this is good, because there's just the pause while they're figuring out the next plan, right? So I don't want to completely burst your bubble, but I also don't want you to set yourself up for a big disappointment thinking that this works. It's just a temporary pause. The ultimate solution to emotional blackmail is for us to actually defuse the emotional trigger in us. It doesn't work.
How we respond to their.
Well, it's even before the response. It's that something shifts in us so that we actually no longer have an emotional response. So therefore, our responses to them, our behavior towards them changes because internally something has shifted. So that is this ultimate solution. And that's what, I mean, what we're teaching here at Back to the Fitra, here in the We Are All Okay, also in our Peaceful Hearts, in our certification, in all of our programs, is teaching people to be emotionally resilient so that emotional blackmail just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the solution. And that's really empowering, because it means that nothing has to change for them. It's just you take your journey of growth. Allah led you to be here today.
Yeah,
Allah led you here. You're in the right place for this to shift. Now, this is not going to be an overnight snap your fingers and all is well solution, because you're talking about a relationship that's been your entire life.
Yeah.
And so you will have lots of stories that you have accumulated throughout your life that are related to that relationship. And so bit by bit, as you start to debunk some of the stories that you've created, you'll shed a whole lot of layers and eventually come back to this place of confidence where you'll be able to set limits with them with love and compassion and utmost respect.
Inshallah. I'll keep coming back.
Do keep coming back. And if you need more support, then we have more support. This is just, the We Are All Okay group is just the beginning. But keep coming.
Where would you be able to forward me that information, please? Because I'm really interested.
Absolutely. So are you in the We Are All Okay WhatsApp
group? Yes.
Yeah. So you will have seen I've just posted there the link to come in here. So click on me there and send me a WhatsApp message there so that I can respond to it, just so it reminds me, because I have a mind like a sieve. So the
Yeah,
best
yeah,
thing to do is send me a WhatsApp message saying, can I send more details? And I'll do that, inshallah.
sure. Thank you so much.
You're most
Jazakallah khair.
welcome. I hope, if anything, you're walking away from this with some hope.
I have. Thank you so much. Inshallah.
Inshallah. All right. We've actually gone a bit long today, but it's been a good question, mashallah. Especially the emotional blackmail. Big one. I love that I don't have to suffer emotional blackmail anymore. Alhamdulillah. Any other quick questions before we go? Great to see some new names here today, mashallah. Anyone want to share a takeaway from the session? We had a very wonderful takeaway from Sister Aksa. Anyone else got a takeaway? Oh, good. All right. Well, next week we're having a break because I'm traveling and I'll be at a conference. But inshallah, in 2 weeks' time, we will be back again for We Are All Okay Wednesday. Just keep an eye out. If you're not in the school membership area, which is where all the recordings are and where the calendar is, make sure you go in there. I'll post that actually in the WhatsApp group to make sure you can get in there. That's where you'll find all the past recordings. It's where you'll find the calendar to find out what sessions are on and when, because we do have webinars and things as well that we run on parenting, on addiction, that sort of thing. So yeah, make sure you're in there if you aren't already. See you in 2 weeks, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.